Hello, fams. Happy Wednesday. I am Violette de Ayala. I'm the founder and CEO of FemCity, and you're joining me today for Business for Your Soul. It is our podcast that we actually live stream into our Facebook group. And so you might notice that we have some comments that we share, and we welcome you guys to join us over on facebook.com/FemCity. Today, I have a wonderful guest. I've already fallen in love with her energy when we were in the green room preparing. And I think that you guys are absolutely going to adore her as well. And I think she's going to share a lot of wisdom for us today for our Wednesday wisdom theme. She is Bridgit Dengel Gaspard. I hope I said that right. I practiced, but you never know. Clinical social work and therapist. And she's the author of The Final Eighth: Enlist Your Inner Selves to Accomplish Your Goals. And she has presented at Columbia School of Social Work and also at NYU, which you guys know, I love NYU. Bridgit, welcome to the FemCity podcast.
Thanks, Violet. I'm so happy to be here. And yes, the green room was so fun. I'm looking forward to now.
I know, because Shauna's on now saying, I love that digital green room. You know what I always say? The best conversations sometimes take place prior to our recording and then after, because we're kind of, filling out the energies and looking to see how we're going to, share and be of service to those that are listening. So I always want to capture, maybe eventually we'll do like the behind the scenes and capture that conversation after, because it's always really enjoyable. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know that you are an expert, a guru. I felt like it would be a perfect time for you to be a guest. The energies are feeling very heavy in the world, I think now more than ever. And I think it's a great conversation for us to have today about goals and feeling stuck. Do you want to mention anything about your background before we dive in a little bit?
Sure, because I think you're right, especially during this time, being stuck, what's your priorities, what goals are worthy? So we'll talk more about that. But I'm a former performer, and I stumbled upon this work called voice dialogue. And it's a way that you talk to different parts of yourself and you find out their wisdom. You don't try to get rid of anybody. And so I read about this and I'm like, who is doing it? And I chased down the doctors Hal and Sidra Stone, and they'd eventually become my mentors. And so I'm trained in this technique, and it's a wonderful creativity tool. But what I found is I got trained in it and started facilitating and teaching facilitators how healing it was. And that's what made me go back to school actually and go to Columbia and become a master's licensed social worker, because I was so impressed with the healing power of having access to the different parts of yourself. And so my book, which is about focusing on finish line issues, which usually are success issues and not failure issues, that's a little secret, that I wanted to help people be able to do this method. And so I created this book, and it really is a step-by-step guide for anybody who picks it up. So a lot of what we're talking about, don't worry, because the book is really like, here's A and then B and then C. For those of us like me who have a self like, wait, I need a manual. This is a manual.
Love it. Love it. And we're having connection issues.
Oh.
She's going to carry it on.
Yes. If I don't know if you can be heard, Violet. We already said that if Violet disappears for some reason, I would take the show. But are you being heard right now, Violet? I can't hear you. Does that mean no one else can?
I need to change into another Wi-Fi eventually. Maybe next week I'll find.
So,
a lot. Okay, a lot of times very stuck, and so I was going to ask you
now
let's dive in a little.
Sure, what can be heard? I'm going to use my glasses now so I can see if Violet can give me some directions, because I'm not sure if I'm talking over you, Violet. So
I can hear you.
You can hear me? Okay. Well, what we were going to talk about being stuck, and that's the final eighth. What is the final eighth? It's for people who are hardworking and creative and talented, they get 7/8 of the way there and then mysteriously stall in front of their finish line. And I was working with a lot of clients and I realized this is a phenomenon. These are amazing people. So it's not about that they get really close and they're suddenly stalled and they feel terrible. And it can be in finances, health, career, love, creativity. And so that's why I started to write this book, because it was also something I've struggled with. And I talk about that in the book, that it's very painful. And so we can look at it many different ways. One is, I always like to say, if it's a final eighth issue, it's a mystery. Because if, let's say, I figured out I wanted to be a psychotherapist, which I did, and then I found out what's the quickest way in New York. So that wasn't a final eighth issue. That was, I had a goal, I figured out what to do, and then I made it happen. So it's a final eighth issue, really, when you're like, what if I had gone to school but never quite gotten that last incomplete essay and I never got my degree? That would be the final eighth issue. But wait a minute, you went to school, you're almost there. And what you find out is you think you want your goal with every fiber of your being, but not every part of you wants what you think you want. And that was the key. And the idea of using voice dialogue, so I was already used to thinking of different parts of myself and everybody. It's a healthy personality. This is not about a mental illness. It's just, we humans think of ourselves as different alter egos and personas. And then I realized that all of these selves have wisdom. So they're painful and that doesn't feel good, but now they have your attention. And so my book really asks readers to get in touch with their vulnerability, essentially, and find out whether it's an addictive self, like one that suddenly likes to start drinking a little too early in the afternoon, or shopping and anything that basically makes you spend hours away from yourself and what you should be doing. So something as clear as that to procrastination or confusion, like, oh, I'm suddenly not sure what to do. And yet, you have parts that are really excellent at time management and going forward. And so when you talk to these different parts, and let's say you go to the part of you that's just, you have labeled lazy. So you go to that lazy part. And in my book that I teach, you don't say, hey, lazy part, could you like just pep it up a little bit? No, you're curious. And the lazy part, you move over literally to a different part of the room and then you come back to center. But if I'm the lazy part, and a lot of dialogue, as you know, is not just words, it's body. So the lazy part might be all the way over here, doesn't even want to get up when someone enters the room, and you embody it. And that's part of the fun. So the lazy part says something like, anything at once, you're just curious. And it's like, you know what? I'm not really lazy. That's their like mean name for me. What I am is laid back. And if Bridgit over there doesn't pay attention to me, she's actually going to get sick because she never slows down. So I just throw in some lazy energy and then she kind of gets a little overwhelmed. And really, I want her to take a nap, because if she takes a nap, she won't get sick. But if she doesn't listen to me, she will. And it's that kind of thing. And on some level, you can negotiate with the different parts of yourself. And you have to be realistic. Like if you have parts, I'm sure everybody does, that wants to go 100 hours a week for years and years on end. And it doesn't happen. Something happens that stops it. So to me, your only choice is the tragedy happens, right? The diagnosis or the injury, and then you're forced to slow down. The end. Or you can have some control. Like, you know what, I had a colleague who used to call it maintenance Mondays. That was her day off. And maintenance Mondays, no alarm, but it included the nails, the hair, and I loved it. But maintenance Mondays were non-negotiable for her.
That's how
I thought that was very good.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my Fridays are like that. My Fridays, I mean, I'm working this Friday, but usually Friday, it is it's not cute like maintenance Monday, but it's like, I guess, free Friday. I'm not really sure. So
yeah, think of something. Frilly Friday.
So is it normal to feel stuck? I mean, I think a lot of us, when we do get stuck, we feel like we're abnormal, that it's not part of the process, and we get I think that we build it up to have more anxiety and to feel more disappointed in ourselves. But what you're saying is that I think you're saying is that it is normal to feel stuck in many ways.
Absolutely. And that's another thing is that, so how do you take in this stuckness? So it's 100% normal, because the truth is, if you're not failing, you're not growing. If you're not feeling a little unsure, and is your stuckness just that you don't know? And maybe there's a part of you that doesn't like to admit, I don't know. And so what my book asks is you slow down to find out what's really going on. Now, a lot of parts of us still believe core negative beliefs from the early days, and they've done a lot of work, but somewhere deep inside. So they make the stuckness false, but proof that you are this negative thing. Either you're not talented enough or things don't work out for you. And these are very painful core negative beliefs. So it's natural frustration. If you haven't done something before, it's going to be a stretching experience, hard, overwhelming. All of those are natural. And then instead of saying, well, it's true, it's growth pains, and now I can move forward, if you take it to some, like you said, anxiety, if it just feeds the anxious part that's like, see, oh my God, it's all gonna crumble. And that part has wisdom, but it can't be the one leading your show, because if it's all gonna crumble, you're just not gonna charge in like you need to. However, you cannot ignore that part that looks around and says, where's the danger? Where's the danger? Because if you pay attention, that part might say, I don't like this potential business partner. And if you just bulldoze over that, instead of saying, oh, well, all right, maybe I need to wait 48 hours before I make that decision. So what I love about this book is you can really go deep in a transformational personal growth way, but then it's really pragmatic. You can say things to yourself like, okay, let me make a few phone calls, or it'll give you concrete ideas. And that's why I love it. The technique works micro and macro.
And you have some love coming through. So Sina says, love the idea of Maintenance Monday or Fab Friday. And she said, I once heard a fabulous expression, growth happens in the darkness. And I love that. Yeah, I truly believe that as well. I know you do, Bridget. So what are some techniques and tips for those that are feeling stuck right now that are really looking to kind of move ahead? What are some techniques that you have in the book that you can share with us today to help some of those that are feeling a little bit desperate?
I love jumping in. So here's an exercise that people can do immediately. It's a unique kind of pros and cons list. So you think about what parts of you are pro your goal and what parts are against your goal. And sometimes I like to think of it as a tug of war image with, certain cells pro pulling on the rope with against the certain cells that are con, and write down the cells. Like it could be, the pro goal would be the visionary, the wanting to, the responsible one, the one that wants to make sure that there's a legacy, enough wealth for the family. And some of them another might be just like a builder, like I love building businesses or whatever it is. And then on the other side might be a procrastinator, a perfectionist, or a plain old terrified inner child, or a cynic, or an apathetic one. And then when you write them down, you're like, oh, because you think you know what the selves are, and you'll be right, but there's always a surprise. There'll be a couple more that you're like, really? I have a cynic? I didn't know I still had one, or whatever it is. Then you figure out, all right, if my cynic has wisdom, what is my cynic trying to tell me? If I was to ask you, Violet, what would your inner cynic, what would be a little wisdom that if you listen to your inner cynic, what it might tell you?
I know in the past, I actually, on Monday, I was a part of a class here in Miami for entrepreneurship. And I share that, there were some times where I would go through, like when I closed my Pilates studio before I opened FemCity, there were some words there that I would describe myself because I couldn't sell the Pilates studio and I wasn't able to have it so that it could grow beyond what it was and all this other stuff. So definitely in my mind, I would replay those words over and over again. But what I found is it actually leveraged me to, when I created FemCity, it leveraged me to think about really scalability and having it so I didn't make the same mistake. So it kind of helped me. Those moments helped me to kind of process in order for me to become a bigger developer of what I'm doing now and serving more women. So I totally get what you're saying, is that those moments that it happens and it's like almost like a permission to dig in a little bit. Like when you recognize that, you're like, wait a moment, let me dig here a little bit more because I'm being a cynic with something here.
That's exactly right. And when you think about what you just said, that's priceless. I mean, what you just described, that you've got to be able to have a larger foundation so that you can really have your dream come true. And so a lot of our allies, like our cynic or the one that just kept saying, don't forget, it's painful. Our allies are not all warm and fuzzy and let's have a pajama party. Some of them are like a 5-star general. They've got a campaign to run. But if you listen to them, they'll often back off. But don't ask that general to be, like I said, warm and encouraging per se. They might say, look, don't forget to file for your X, whatever it is. And if you do, you're in trouble. And so it might be felt like, oh, I know. But the fact is, sometimes we need those energies when we're an entrepreneur or many other things, when it's like, we got to get things done. Right. But so that's the other thing, is sometimes people confuse the physiological experience of a self as being negative. And in psychotherapeutic circles, we would call that negative emotions because they don't feel good. But it's not about good or bad, moral, immoral, correct, incorrect. It is not. It just means like, yeah, cynicism at its worst can be painful.
I love that.
Yeah.
Kashana says, some selves are pro and some are con. The authority self, the visionary, the perfectionist, etc., versus the inner critic, cynic, or inner child. Getting to know them is powerful. And then she added hashtag permission to dig in. Yes. And I think Kashana is actually a really good hashtag creator, because I think on one of our episodes, she's did a really cool hashtag also. But I love that, because you're right. Well, of course you're right. This is your jam. But I guess I'm understanding myself more, because in the past, sometimes you disguise all that when you have that kind of cynic or that negative talk, and you dismiss it right away because, oh, that's bad. But if you realize that actually that's a purposeful thought that leads you into a more profound development of the self, because it tells you where the issues are that you need to kind of go through.
And you're making me think of something else. So I know I have one, and so do many men, but I think women suffer more with the good girl, the polite, the nice. And so I know in my past, I have completely ignored signs about people because my good girl just doesn't like to believe anybody's bad. And I can just work harder being gooder and nicer and more accommodating, which is the exact opposite of what is needed sometimes. So that's the other thing. If you're too much in one or two selves, you have to be missing the other side, because my good girl only has really a few strategies, but they're all about making sure you're happy. And if it's at my expense, my good girl really doesn't care. My good girl is focused out. How are you doing? I want to see how you're doing. And if that's all we have, we are so limited. However, when we want to just join people and be warm and helpful, it's wonderful. Again, not good or bad. But just a good girl on your board of directors, I don't think that's a good business plan.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think more women have that. That would be a whole other conversation that I'd love to have, is that why do we have that? Why do women dismiss that inner conversation when it's really intuition? And it's like a red flag in many ways, just to kind of look a little bit more, like just don't dive in, like take a look and see. But that I don't even want to open up that box, because that's a whole other segment.
It's on Christmas. We'll open that gift later.
We'll open that later. And I just realized the time. So any final advice that you have for those that are really looking, perhaps now you've gotten them to look at the conversations, to see, how they can dive in a little bit more. Any advice that you have for them further in?
Well, what comes to mind right now is that we are in such different, unique times. And if you can get curious about it, maybe there's like little techies, like Kashana with her hashtag maker. Like there really might be parts of you that are just underneath that are creative. And instead of being scared, or you could be scared, but don't let the fear make you go, all right, let me learn the basics. But then maybe I can be more of an artist with it. So be curious. We only know what we know. But the great news is there's so much we don't know, and it can be wonderful news. And I'll close with Colin Wilson's comment that when I heard this decades ago, I'm like, this is my philosophy of life, which is live as if any moment you can get the absurd good news.
I love that. I might actually have to borrow that too.
Please.
Yes.
Amazing, right? I'm like, why didn't I find this when I was 15?
Yeah. One of my spiritual advisors, she always says she's excited for the day because her whole life could change based on the person she meets that day. Like she just went out with Wander like every day, walking the dog. Who's she going to meet? Like it was just opening up, realizing that the blessings are all around. We changed the mindset. Very similar to what you just shared. And Krishana says, my life started changing when I shifted to tracking the wisdom from these inner selves through varied modalities of wellness. Love that. The primal self is important in business is important. For those of you that are listening and watching and you want to get to know Bridgit and her book more, can they stay connected to you? Where can they find your book?
It's sold everywhere. Everyone is welcome to come this Friday to the book launch party, which is virtual and free, but you have to RSVP. And final8th.com is the website, 8 with a TH. Or you can Google my name. I'm all over the social media. I'm getting us. I have a social media princess that soon I think will be a queen, but I have to work at that. So please, and feel free to contact me. I really am available every which way, including good old fashioned emails, which I learned from one of your interviews that you said is that it all boils down to emails as well. So I learned so much from the people you put on, and I'm just glad to be a part of hooking it up. I think that's the other thing, is that voice dialogue helps you hook up the things you already know, and then they shift into ways like your spiritual teacher said, like, wow, look what I just met. Fabulous,
Love it. Love it. And you have a last bit of love for you from Sienna Lewis, kind of like we're reborn every day, new self, new everything every day. Love that. Love that. Thank you so much, Bridgit. I hope that you will be back and we could talk about that other topic that we don't want to bring up right now because that's a whole other 30 minutes. But it was so enjoyable getting to know you and also learning from you. And I'm very grateful that you're doing this work in the world. I wish you the best success and your book. And thanks for being a part.
Thanks, Violet. This is a beginning and I'm loving it. Thank you.
Awesome. And for those that want to get to know FemCity more, head over to femcity.com and check us out over there. Much love to you guys.